First of all, to everyone who's participating, thank you so much for joining us today for this second joint meeting of the Senate and House Appropriations Committees as we prepare for the FY21 budget. Chairman England, thank you again for joining us with us, and for your members joining, and senators, thank you for joining as well. We want to welcome Dr. Dorfman and also Director Farr. As you know, last week we had a meeting where they went over various figures concerning this year's budget and economic data. We took your questions afterwards, and we have submitted them to our presenters today, and they're going to go through those shortly and give the answers that you've submitted out to the questions already. And at this time, I want to hand it over to Chairman England for his comments.
All right. Thank you, Chairman Tillery. Good to see everybody this morning. Hope everyone's staying healthy and your families are doing good as well. Good to see you again this week, and hopefully you'll come out of this meeting with some productive and good information. I think our two presenters again today have several questions, and we're going to turn it over to them in just a minute. But at this point, I'd like to call on Senator Larry Walker, if he would, to open us up with an invocation. Senator Walker.
Thank you, Chairman England, and good morning, everybody. Bow with me, please. Heavenly, we pause this morning acknowledging your power and sovereignty over heaven and earth, Lord. The Apostle James tells us that every good and perfect gift comes from you. And we thank you for the abundant blessings you've given us, especially your ultimate gift, our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. We find ourselves in difficult times, challenging times. We thank you for your wisdom and guidance as we make decisions for the people of Georgia. We know the prophet Jeremiah promised your people that you have a plan for us, a plan to prosper us, a plan to give us hope and a future, Father. And we claim this promise from you today, Lord, as we meet to do the people's business. We pray, Lord, that you will bless all the leaders gathered on this call. We thank you for them and the time they give to serve our man. We pray blessings on our governor, lieutenant governor, and our speaker. Give them wisdom and draw them close to you, Lord. We pray that everything we do today will be honor you and be pleasing to you. And we ask again for your leadership and guidance. In Christ we pray, amen.
Amen. Thank you so much, Senator. Appreciate those comments and appreciate that prayer as well. I want to thank once again House Media Services, Betsy and her team for being able to get us all together here. One of these days we'll get to see each other face to face again too, and that'll be good, but it sure is good to see your faces this morning. I will tell you that in my life yesterday felt a little back to normal. We started putting hay in bales. I'm a little sore and stove up this morning from doing that, but it sure felt good being on a tractor yesterday and smelling some diesel fuel burn and seeing hay go into square bales. So that being said, we've got quite a bit on the agenda today, and trying to keep be respectful of y'all's time and our presenters' time. Chairman Tillery, you got any other comments, or we want to head on into Dr. Dorfman and Director Farr?
Again, echo the comments that you made about the media services. Thank you so much for your help. We had over 1,000 people who were either viewing online or participating last week. So thank you also members who submitted these questions today and the questions that you submitted in early April to agencies as well. So with no further ado, we will hand the questions off. I think Director Farr and Dr. Dorfman have divided the questions themselves, so we'll hand the podium over to you guys and let you begin in whichever fashion you see fit.
Thank you. Yeah, like was mentioned yesterday, we'll just kind of go through the different questions one by one. But, first, Chairman England, Chairman Tillery, members of the committee, before we begin, I want to take a moment and thank each of you for your hard work and dedication. It goes without saying that we are living in unprecedented times. As lawmakers, you all know too well the impact COVID-19 has had on Georgia families, businesses, and of course the state budget. These moments call for bold leadership, and I know that's what Georgians will see under this gold dome. Today, I hope to be as helpful as possible. I know you have an important job ahead of you. While we still have data to collect and numbers to crunch, our office wants to serve as a dependable resource. If there's information I cannot provide today, rest assured we will get it to you as soon as possible. Thanks for having me, and Jeffrey and I look forward to answering your questions. And so I'll start with the first question under revenue performance and balances. It is, can you talk for a moment about lottery fund balance and if there's a need to draw on those reserves? Not beyond any ordinary practices that I'm aware of, and sales for lottery seem to be holding up pretty well. The next question, Jeffrey.
Yep, so I've got the second question. So good morning to all the senators and representatives. Appreciate your being here and having the chance to answer your questions. My first question was, do you expect the third and fourth quarter of 2020 to pick up and return to near normal in terms of revenue collection? So that would be the first half of fiscal year 21 for us. I think the first 3 months, so in other words, the third quarter of 2020, are likely to be pretty bad in terms of revenue collections, probably more than 10% below the initial projections that were in the governor's original revenue forecast way back in January. And then we'll see more of a returning to normal in the fourth quarter of 2020. The economy has started to reopen, and so that is improving things, and we expect that we're sort of near the bottom now, but it'll take a little while for us to get back to normal. I also have the third question, which is, what is your best estimate for the amount we will need to draw from the RSR to close our FY 2020? So unfortunately, it's too early for us to have a really good estimate yet. How people are reacting to the tax deadline deferral is still something we're learning about every day. We're still trying to figure out how businesses are doing in the reopening. So the best we can say right now is we're projecting we'll need to use somewhere between 1 billion and 1.5 billion of the RSR this fiscal year.
All right, and this is Kelly. I'll take 4 and 5. The fourth question, the state has used its bonding authority to stimulate growth in the economy in the past. Remember sales bills in the 90s. Does this administration have a strategy on the bond package for this fiscal year? We are as anxious to see the bond package created through the legislative process as everyone else. We do support sufficient caution in bond offerings to ensure we maintain our AAA ratings. Then the fifth question is the executive branch engaging in conversations with our congressional delegation and the administration for general fund assistance to speed up the recovery? Yes, the governor has had and continues to have numerous conversations, as well as many on the governor's staff, and encourages the members of this committee and all members to do the same. Is the state, and then the sixth question I'll roll into is mine as well. If the state is reopening now, why is a 14% reduction needed? In FY21, when businesses are opening and we have another month and a half for things to normalize before the start of the new fiscal year. In conversations with the House and Senate budget offices, the planning target of 14% cuts for agencies was to get agencies preparing for whatever possible level of cuts end up being necessary. Once the governor's revenue estimate is updated somewhere around June 1, the actual cuts can then be decided by the legislature. Number 7 continues to be mine. explained the philosophy for why we must make steep reductions at the beginning of the fiscal year when there's an opportunity to make adjustments as needed during the amended budget. Mid-year adjustments are more costly and damaging in terms of disruption to the agencies as well as those they serve. It also gives agencies less time to respond to any budget cuts for the fiscal year. Dr. Dorfman?
Yep, back to me now. Now, I remember we're reading the questions before we're answering them. So as I read this one, I'm not talking about myself in the third person as a normal course of events, but that's just how the question reads. During Dr. Dorfman's testimony last Thursday, he indicated the economy would improve when consumers felt confident and comfortable physically entering the marketplace. What metric or metrics can we be watching for? Is there a leading indicator? Do consumer confidence surveys specific to Georgia exist? So there is no Georgia-specific confidence survey as yet, although I am aware that some University of Georgia researchers are launching a project along those lines. So we may have some data within the next couple of months about that. There's a new national poll out today that suggests a majority of Americans are saying they won't feel safe resuming full normal activities until at least July. So I think there's no sort of official metric. The best I can suggest is what I'm doing, which is watching surveys like that, which ask people, do you feel safe going shopping? Do you feel safe getting on an airplane, things like that. And then right now, people last month had said June, and this month they pushed back another month to July. We've seen data that people are returning to businesses as the economy reopens. So it's not everybody, but there are still some people waiting. I also have the next question, which is in the context of K through 12 education, about 40% of their funding comes from local sources. From the information presented last week, we have a picture of the state economy, but do we have data on local property tax digest projections? The long-term economic impact of high unemployment could lead to housing foreclosures and ultimately impact local tax digests. Is there concern of a housing price collapse on the state level? So the short answer is no. I expect housing prices to be fairly flat, but I don't expect a collapse in housing prices. This year's tax digests are based on appraisals that were mostly conducted before the shutdown. So schools, cities, counties should be very little affected in the current fiscal year. Next year, so appraisals that'll happen in the fall and winter and into the spring of 2021, I suspect most places will see little growth in their digest, but I don't expect to see a collapse with all the aid that the federal government is pumping out, but the economy already reopening. I think house prices will be able to hold steady. I think.
All right. Yep. The next question is for me. This is Kelly. With the reduction in traffic volume and a drop in motor fuel revenues, how do we maintain our investment in infrastructure and economic benefit it provides the state? It's my understanding that the Georgia Department of Transportation generally expends funds that are essentially from the previous year's revenue. So they may be okay, and they should be able to smooth out any expenditures over time to help mitigate any potential impact. The next one is, how will funds be distributed for the local portion of the CARES Act funds? The governor's office and myself have spoken with GMA and ACCG about the plan they've discussed with their membership, and they've gotten a lot of great feedback from those two organizations and their members, and we anticipate an initial plan for distributing the local CARES money very soon.
All right, now it's back to me. Next question is, Georgia economic activity cannot be seen in isolation. Our economic well-being depends on a national and global economic recovery. Currently, the national debt and deficit are rising exponentially, and at one point, the U.S. will have to cover those debts and deficits, either by raising taxes, increasing austerity measures, or increasing inflation. How do you see this impacting Georgia And what predictions could you make that we could utilize in our long-term economic recovery planning? So that's really a federal government question. It's pretty much beyond our control. However, I don't expect to see the federal government address the deficit national debt anytime soon. They certainly haven't acted like it the last couple of months. Nor do I expect inflation to become a serious problem unless we have a lot of factory closings or shortages of goods. And so far, for all the stuff about it, actually, our supply chain and economy has been tremendously well through this and generally keeping most of the shelves full and goods available. All right, now we're moving to the tax code and policy section of questions. And I've got the first one, which is what decline in income revenue for the current year can be attributed to the shifting of the tax filing deadline? In other words, about how much can still be expected to recoup, albeit later. Best estimate I have right now is that about $1.35 billion of tax revenue has been delayed by the deadline deferral. I expect us to eventually recoup somewhere between $1 and $1.5 billion of that.
All right. The next question is mine. This is Kelly again. Given that the COVID-19 pandemic has shifted the way that Georgians do business and leisure, shift to digital, what changes could be made to the tax code to reflect the changing economy and boost revenue in the long term? I think that's a great policy question. I hope that the legislature discusses and debates that question. And I also, look forward to being a resource, as I mentioned earlier, to help analyze any of the impact that those policy discussions may have on the revenue to the state. The next question, what changes to the tax code could be made to incentivize, I think that's what I meant to say, and aid businesses that are trying to reopen? Similar to the question above, I think that is another great policy question that should be discussed and debated. I think that the legislature has a lot of great leaders in its membership to tackle those types of questions, and anything we can do here in the governor's office and OPB to help analyze the impact of those changes and how it may or may not impact revenue, we certainly look to be a partner in those discussions. Jeffrey?
Yep, back to me now. Next question is, what is the estimated impact on the economy from raising sin taxes on tobacco, vaping, and alcohol, even digital downloads? So the amount of revenue raised by additional taxes on tobacco and alcohol depends on how much rates are raised. We could have a small tax increase or a big tax increase. If the legislature proposes any tax law changes, I, along with OPB and Department of Audits, stand ready to help analyze those tax law changes and tell you how much money we think they'll raise. Now, back to Kelly.
Yep. And we're now entering the operating section, which will be mostly mine. I think Jeffrey may have a question or two on this. So the first question is, can we create a publicly accessible website for tracking the CARES Act funding by the state? Yes, we can, and that is currently part of our planning. Next question. Do you have an estimate for the expected amount of funding being withheld or unspent by agencies for the current fiscal year? At this time, we do not have an estimate. We are actively working with all agencies to capture as many of the unspent funds as possible. The next question. We appropriated $100 million from the RSR. How much of that has been spent to date, and to which entities? How much has been spent and what the specific amount has been spent on, we have provided to both of the appropriation committees of the House and Senate, and to date the total amount has been provided to GMA. The The next question is, has regulatory oversight of Plant Vogtle been considered with the 14% budget cuts? And then in parentheses, Georgia Power Southern Company announced a while back that COVID forced layoffs, so the project may be delayed, which is a nice excuse for them since they weren't going to hit the scheduled completion date anyways, from what I heard. Similar to Jeffrey's comment earlier, we're just reading these questions. These are not our opinions, they're editorials. The answer to that is I think that question may be best addressed through the appropriation process and with the appropriation committees. Number 5, have any of the emergency funds been used to backfill the Department of Corrections healthcare deficit or COVID-related expenses? To date, the total amount of COVID-19 funds has been provided to GEMA in support of the state's direct response to COVID-19. With agencies looking, and then the next question is, with agencies looking to incrementally reopen in the future, is OPB providing guidance regarding what safety protocols are expected to be in place at every state office to protect state employees and the citizens they serve? Approximately how much do you foresee needing to be budgeted for these protocols, and when will agencies get that information? Also, government agencies have continued to operate during this time. Working in office buildings and face-to-face deliveries of services is still ongoing in many places. It will likely ramp up in coming months. We will have and we will continue to follow DPH guidelines on safe operations. The next question. Agencies have had to creatively address the reality of operating mostly remotely during the pandemic, and some found efficiencies in the process. Will OPB and the governor's office consider encouraging agencies to make some of the remote working policies permanent to maintain these efficiencies? The governor encourages all state agencies to embrace and utilize technology to better and most cost effectively serve their constituents. I personally know that has been a desire of his from the first time he met with agency heads last year. And then it's just very exciting to see some of the innovations that have occurred during the crisis, and we look forward to more innovation going forward. How long are express service cuts expected to last, and what will the impact on those revenues? ? Will CARES Act funds cover the shortfall? It's my understanding that Express has received funds through the CARES Act, but I'm not sure how long it will last for the Express service. I would encourage y'all to reach out to the agency. Does OPB still have the strategic hiring process in place for agencies? Has that process changed at all with the current situation? Yes, the strategic hiring process is still in place, with the exception of DPH, which has a temporary exemption from this policy during the governor's public health emergency declaration. And the last question will be Jeffrey's.
Now you have to wrap things up. Last question is, as we open the economy back up, at what rate can we see the partial unemployment drop? Do these employers have to come back up to full-time status before they are no longer eligible for unemployment? That's a good question. Partial claims are likely to drop slowly, as the businesses filing these claims are primarily ones in the harder hit segment of our economy, like restaurants and hotels. And although restaurants certainly are reopening, they're still restricted by the governor's safety guidelines on how many people can be in the restaurant, so probably aren't fully staffing up. You can use unemployment insurance eligibility before you reach full-time status. It depends on your aggregate earnings per week, but it's not an instant thing. If you were a 40-hour week worker, they took you down to 10 and filed a partial claim, and now you're back up to 20, you would probably still be eligible. So it's going to be a fluid thing, but you do not have to be all the way up to full-time status before you lose your eligibility. And I believe that answers all the questions we received from the two committees. Thank you for the opportunity.
Yes, Chairman England, Chairman Tillery, and members of the committee. Like I mentioned when I opened this question session, I know how challenging and difficult it's going to be to get this budget put together in a way that's going to be respectful of all the difficult decisions that are going to have to be made. And having been an employee during the last time there was a recession, I do take comfort knowing that y'all's leadership is going to be there to help guide us through this challenging time. And at the governor's office and at OPB, we look forward to helping support y'all, providing whatever information you may need. And just want to thank y'all personally for the partnership and the communication y'all have shared with me through these times as we continue to learn and evaluate, and the patience you've shown. So I want to thank both of you and the members of the committee, and thank y'all for the time today.
Thank you, Director Farr. Thank you, Dr. Dorfman. Thank you for answering all the questions that we had submitted. Members, thank you as well again for your participation today. This is going to be a process that we're going to rely on you to continue to let us know what's going on in your districts. Let us know what's going on in your backyards and in areas where you have expertise. Chairman England, do you have anything you'd like to say as we wrap this up?
Thank you, Chairman Tillery. Just wanted to follow up with Kelly just for a second on the local portion of the CARES Act funds. In everything we've been seeing from Treasury and the guidance and frequently asked question documents they've sent out, it does appear that the states will be held responsible for any dollars that have gone out once they're audited. And if localities have gotten dollars that are not deemed the appropriate expenditure of those dollars, that the state will actually be the one responsible for paying that back. And just wanted to see kind of what your thoughts were a little bit on the management of those funds as they go out the door, and how we kind of, since we're on the hook, even though we don't necessarily get to spend it, what thoughts have you got on trying to just kind of keep a handle on it?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. And the feedback we've got is the same that you just communicated, that, while the Treasury and the federal government allows the state to provide and actually encourages the states to provide, some of this funding to localities, ultimately it would be the responsibility of the state should some of that money be spent inappropriately. And so, we've had a lot of conversations with peers of mine all around this country about how they're handling it. I think we've also had a lot of really good conversations with GMA and ACCG. I've been very, very thankful of the kind of ownership that they have indicated they're willing to take on with helping making sure that happens. I think that they have submitted a plan to the governor that I thought was very well thought out. I think that we still need to make sure we have some guardrails in place, and that we are a little bit deliberate here in the very beginning, while at the same time making sure we're not limiting unnecessarily any amount of money that these localities need to meet the response to COVID-19. And so we hopefully will, in our conversations with the governor and ACCG and GMA and the different planning partners, hopefully have something here pretty soon to roll out. I know Texas yesterday just kind of rolled out a plan that, some of my contemporaries have found to be kind of a pretty good model. I know that some other states have done similar things, and so we're definitely going to keep the advice or the concern that you have in the back of our minds as we keep going through this planning process.
Okay. One little follow up. Have you been able to find the pandemic planning model handbook that you've been looking for?
Yes, ma'am. I actually called Teresa McCartney the other day to ask her where she hid it, because I've turned OPB upside down and I have yet to be able to find it in all these stacks of books. We have all of these papers and documents. It's got to be somewhere around here, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, well,
I thought you might have checked it out as well. Did you give it back to us?
I have looked. It is not on my bookshelf. I've looked in my boxes of records and stuff, and I can't find it anywhere. I'm sorry. Well, Chairman Tillery, that's all I've got. Just gonna see if you got anything else.
Yeah, I think it's important so a lot of the questions seem to revolve around local funding. I think it's important for us also to tell you, we do have some documents from the federal government for the funding they have already sent to your local school systems, to higher education, and also to your local hospitals. We had nothing to do with that. That passed from Congress, kind of came out through other agencies. And we will share that data. I think we've shared it with you already, but it's easy for us to share it again so that can help you answer questions from constituents, and also just help you have a better feeling of what's going on in your backyard. If there are no other comments, Chairman England, I guess we will stand adjourned until we put this back together again.
All right, that sounds good to me. We may hopefully by some point next week have another call. A little bit different format, maybe some guests on that can look at some of the things that Congress might be doing. And again, everybody will be welcome to be on that call as well, but we don't have any details just yet on everything there, but we'll get that out to you as soon as we know for sure and get that nailed down. But that seems to be everything that I've got. I'm seeing 11:48, so we're going to wrap up a little bit early, and everybody can go get takeout or go through the drive-through real quick and pick up some lunch. But again, thank you everyone for being with us. As I said early on, good to see your faces, and certainly look forward to the point at some point that we can be back together face to face. Somehow or another figure out a way that we can shake hands and hug necks too. That's one of the things that I'm finding myself missing more than I realized. Got over to the farm yesterday, and one of my grandbabies looked at me and said, "I wish I could give you a hug, but I can't right now." And I was just glad that I had sunglasses on at that point, because my eyes started sweating just a little bit when he told me that. So I know it's tough on everybody, and we're missing our fellowship at restaurants in the morning, eating a biscuit, and our churches on Sundays and Wednesday nights and other times too. And we're going to get through this, y'all. It's going to be a little bit different and still be a little bit difficult for a little bit, but we're going to get through it. Good Lord's got his hand on us, and he'll let us know in his time what it is that we're supposed to do and how we're supposed to do it. And I've got total and complete faith in that, and certainly hope that all of you do too.
Thank you for your comments, Chairman England. We now will stand adjourned.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.